Hare Krishna. Okay, so I think we went through quite a few verses yesterday. The other day, did we do verse 60? Past that one?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh,
Yes, we did.
Chaitanya Dasi is doing this.
Sorry, during singing part, during the singing part.
We did this.
We didn't, but during class we
didn't. Okay, got it. Very nice. Gurudev, did you want to start here? I think we're close to the end of the chapter. Let me just double check real quick. Yeah.
How many verses are left?
There's about 6.
Okay, we'll just have a discussion after.
Okay. All right, let's chant the invocation mantras. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
We cannot hear you.
Swaha bimaninas chagner atmajang trin ajijanat bhavakam pavamanam cha suchim cha utabhojanam. The predominating deity of fire begot in his wife Swaha 3 children, namely Pavaka, Pavamana, and Suchi, who exist by eating the oblations offered to the fire of sacrifice. Text 61. Tebyo jnaya samabhavan changvarim shach chapancha cha evaikona panchashat shakam pitri pitamahai. For those 3 sons, another 45 descendants were generated, who are also fire gods. The total number of fire gods is therefore 49, including the fathers and grandfathers. We read this, actually. Believe it or not. Text 62. Vaitanike karmani jannamavir brahmavadhibihi agneya ishtayo yagye nirupyante gyanastute. These 49 fire gods are the beneficiaries of the oblations offered in the Vedic sacrificial fire by impersonalist Brahmanas. Text 63. Agnishtvata barishadha shomya pitara ajapaha Sagnayo nagnayastesham patni dakshayani swadha. The Agni Shattas, the Barhishaddas, the Somyas, and the Ajapas, and the Pitas, they're either Sagnita or Niragnita. The wife of all these Pitas is Swadha, who is the daughter of King Daksha. I read that wrong. The Agnivatas, the Shaddas, and the Somyas, and the Ajapas are the Pitas. They are either Sagnika or Niragnika. The wife of all these Pitas is Swadha, who is the daughter of King Daksha. 64. Tebyo dadhara kanyandve Vayunam darinim swadha ubete brahmavadinyo jnana vigyana paragje parage. Swadha, who was offered to the Pitas, begot two daughters named Vayuna and Dharini, both of whom were impersonalists and were expert in transcendental and Vedic knowledge. Text 65. Bhavasya pati patnitu sati bhavam devam anuvrata atmana shadrisham putram nalebhe gunashilataha. The 16th daughter, whose name was Sati, was the wife of Lord Shiva. She could not produce a child, although she always faithfully engaged in the service of her husband. Text 66. Pitara pratirupe se bhavayana gase rusha apranudhaivatat manatmanam najahad yoga samyuta. The reason is that Sati's father Daksha used to rebuke Lord Shiva in spite of Shiva's faultlessness. Consequently, before attaining a mature age, Sati gave up her body by dint of yogic mystic power. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the fourth canto, first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Genealogical Tables of the Daughters of Manu. Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. His Grace Mahatma Prabhu ki jai. Just hold on a second here. Okay. When I click it, it just clicked out. There we go. Anyone have comments, questions? I do. Okay. I don't know. I don't really know who the Pitas are. What are the Pitas?
Pitas means fathers.
Oh, I see. Like Prajapatis.
These are the fathers. Agni, Shah, Taz, Bahisha. I don't know if they're like Prajapatis, but
Oh, the Pitas are fathers.
Well, I don't know if there's a category of a class of race or whatever. Pitas. I could find out. Since could be a class of beings called Pitas. Pita means father. We know these were the fathers of these ladies or these persons. Or about a disciple named Pita Das. Pitas also refers to ancestors. Let me see what else we can find. Pitas also means forefathers. Like in the Gita, you worship the Pitas, you go to the Pitas. Worship the forefathers, you go to the fathers.
And what is Sagnika and Niragnita? Nika?
No idea. Generally, well, let's go back to Pitas, the ancestors, the forefathers, if that makes any sense in this. The forefathers, these are the forefathers. Sagnika or Niragnita, Sa means with, Nira means without. Agnika, Agni means fire, but Agnika doesn't mean necessarily with or without fire. Let's see. I have no idea. It doesn't say. There's no reference in Prabhupada's books other than this reference. So sometimes in Sanskrit, when you don't know Sanskrit, you can make an assumption that you have the word Agni, which means fire. And I'm not sure what Ka means. But even if it meant with fire or giving fire and without, I don't know what does that mean? They were born from a fire or not a fire. They did fire sacrifices or didn't. There's a lot of details. But the idea is generally in these dynasties, there's some connection with Krishna or an incarnation of Krishna, that Krishna came in these dynasties or these dynasties followed. And so, or there's some relation to Krishna Lila within these dynasties and stories. So therefore they're there in the Bhagavatam. But they, if you're trying to find some direct insight into how this is relevant, it may not be directly relevant other than it's connected in some way to Krishna and purifying just to hear their names and read it, as opposed to being on Instagram. If Chaitanya Dasi, you have some realization. Yeah.
I can see in the synonyms of the verse, it says, Sa Agnayaha, those whose means is by fire, and no.
They make money doing fire sacrifices, or they're firemen. We don't know.
No.
They make money doing fire sacrifices. They make money putting out fires. This is a classification. It could be a classification of Brahmins who do yagyas, something like that. The problem is a lot of this obviously doesn't relate to anything that's going on in the world today. Neither does it relate to us. And so there's always this challenge of how you take something that doesn't relate directly to us and then make sense of it. And then with these synonyms, we're left to speculate, what does that mean? Whose means is by fire? It sounds like they do fire sacrifices, and that's how they make money. Or they appeared from fire, or they're firemen. They put out fires. It's like, and I think one of the places that we run into some trouble is in trying to apply some things that weren't meant to be applied, that can't be applied presently, or we try to apply them. It creates more problems than good. So I don't know much. And this is these are forefathers, and another thing their means is fire. That means they're worshipped by fire and they get oblations through the fire. That's probably what it means. Because you offer oblations to the forefathers through fire sacrifice. And apparently what you offer, they get, the forefathers. So it's probably what it means. I don't, and some don't get oblations or don't need it or don't exist on oblations, and some do. So, that's the best we can conclude from that, for whatever it's worth. This is good if you want to do like a PhD in Vedic studies and learn a lot of things that only 2 or 3 people in the universe will read your PhD and have any interest at all in. But, it's the kind of stuff you can do and get paid for if you're interested in being a Brahmin. I was just with Gopal, what's his name? Gopal. He's the brother of Radhika Raman. Gopal Hari, he's a professor in the place in Illinois called Naperville. And I was thinking, this is not fair. He gets to speculate and study all day and get paid for it. And I get to speculate and study all day and don't get paid for it. Life is not fair. So if you like to study and speculate, you become a professor and they pay you for it. It's a great job. I mean, basically that's what you're doing, right? Studying and speculating, theorizing and analyzing and contemplating and maybe, and, God forbid you come up with a conclusion, you could lose your job. But you just keep, could be this, could be that, and, theorize this and that. And yeah. So that's what Brahmins do. But for us, our speculation needs to be, have some, we always have to be able to speculate within a context where we can say, this is what it means. like we can speculate it means that they are living off fire sacrifices, because we know that's how they live. So that's a safe speculation. Okay, what else? Did you see there was some verse about ladies? It appears they were Brahmins and scholars and impersonalists. Do you remember that verse? Yeah, this one.
Yes, I think it was 64.
This one right here. Vayana and Dharani, they were impersonal. So it appears they were Brahmins, expert in Vedic knowledge. That's encouraging. For all of those who are convinced women don't have brains for philosophy and understanding Shastra. That may be true for some men and some women, but not for all. Or you could say, well, this was a different time. They were smarter. Well, men were smarter also then. So, but Prabhupada didn't seem to think his female disciples were, he didn't say, you know, I wrote my books for men and you women, good luck. He never said that. Although some men kind of could think that way. Anyway, it says here they're expert in transcendental knowledge, although impersonalists. And it appears that they weren't Mayavadis, but impersonalists, meaning that they were attached to the impersonal conception. And a lot of times impersonalists understand Krishna as a person, but are attached to the impersonal, like a Shanta Ras type thing. So it's a particular Ras. So it doesn't mean, every time you hear the word impersonalist, doesn't mean Mayavad, trying to become one with Krishna, or trying to deny Krishna's personal existence. It can be a preference, just as any other Rasa's preference. Although in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that's not an option. We're not directed to that option.
I see an interesting point about the fire.
Yes.
Sati is this is in the fire, and she's the suffering.
You're talking about
I mean,
Sati burning in the fire?
Yes. And Sati and Swatha is a very interesting personality, I find. Swatha is the wife of Pitas. And
I'm looking at another verse here. It says, Angira had two wives named Swadha and Sati. But this is different Sati, because this is the Sati in this verse was the Sati of Lord Shiva. That's being talked about, right? If you go forward, it talks about the Sati of Lord Shiva burning herself in the fire, which is why she wanted nothing to do with Daksha. Because Daksha was against her husband. And so Sati said, well, you're offensive to my husband, and I want to give him my body because I don't want a body connected to you as my father, because you're contaminated. So if I kill myself, it's like if your guru is contaminated.
She left the body.
She burned her body. By her mystic power, she created fire and burnt in the body. She was upset with Daksha. So,
Gurudev, is this lineage all to do with, so these are 49 fire gods. So this is the lineage here of let's see, daughters of Manu. So his daughters were demigods as well. And this was like demigods of fire. And so Sati would have had that ability to use fire for her leaving her body. Is that correct here? There's like a lineage
Well,
of
it
fire.
could be, or she could just have mystic power to do it also. I think it was, from what we have to go to the story as I remember, she just had mystic power and could burn herself. But maybe that's why you could say she had that power, because she's from that lineage. It's possible. We have to go back and read. Part of the problem is if there's not purports to everything, then we're left to like connect the dots, and we may not be able to connect them all unless we can get books with commentaries on the Bhagavatam. And generally what I understand is where there's no purports, it's because the acharyas didn't comment on the verses, so Prabhupada didn't comment on them. So there may be no more information. And one thing we can think of, well, if there's no information and the acharyas didn't comment on it, there's no need to comment on it. And therefore, we can worry about something else. That's one way of looking at it. For those gyanis out there, they want to know everything. Yeah. So inquisitiveness is good, but I would say that the answer is that she had the power to do that. And you could say maybe because of that dynasty. I don't know if she's actually coming in the dynasty of fire gods. And what is a fire god in the first place anyway? So one who creates fire or puts fire out.
Was Draupadi part of? I don't remember Draupadi's previous births. She was an incarnation of, because she was born of fire as well.
Yeah, right.
Is she? I thought
Whatever
she was
that.
Goddess of fortune.
I don't remember. And what does it mean to be born of fire? That means born of Agni, daughter of Agni. That's what it would mean if you say born of fire. Right? Wouldn't it? Yeah. Well, one thing we can say is we're not Draupadi and we're not Sati. So because we're not, it can be somewhat challenging to understand their nature, their birth, and so forth, and their powers, because we don't have those powers and we don't see them. But for great personalities, I think these powers are quite common. But one thing, which is interesting about Sati, which we could take from it, maybe more relevant, is her integrity, that she's connected to someone who's offending Lord Shiva, not just that Lord Shiva is her husband, that's there, but he's an exalted personality and he's being offended and she wants nothing to do with this offender. And, you're supposed to walk away from offenders, but she couldn't fully walk away because it's her father. And the only way to fully walk away is kill herself and break that connection. So you could see it as an act of integrity, that someone would go to such a length to preserve their integrity as to kill themselves. Not that one should do that, and not that we recommend it, killing yourself, but it's an example, I think, at least of how far she would go to maintain her integrity and purity, because she felt contaminated by that connection. And same way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, if you have a spiritual master and the spiritual master falls and breaks the principles of Krishna consciousness, and doesn't rectify himself, then as a disciple, you have to kind of, you could say reject your guru. Because of that connection, you could become contaminated, and vice versa. Sometimes a guru may have to reject a disciple who is doing something improper, becomes an impersonalist or greatly sinful. So, there is something to that, although, Prabhupada never said, reject your parents, reject this or that. But at least in terms of that connection with guru, there's like a karmic connection. You get the mercy of your guru, but if your guru falls, then without rejecting him, you would also suffer for that sin, and vice versa. Not that we, not that it's a general practice in our movement, but something to consider, which I hope none of you would ever have to do. But in rare cases, it could happen. It's one of the glories of our movement is that we have Prabhupada. So many great gurus have come to the West and been less than pristine in their personal lives. And Prabhupada was beyond any discrepancy. And we're so fortunate. And he set that example for us. But if anyone wants to study these verses and come up with something we may not have seen in them, that's always good.
Okay, any other comments, questions for Gurudev?
More questions I can't answer, right? Any more questions I can't answer?
These verses are so difficult to.
Well, I think the point is there's no purports, which means sometimes when there's no purports, it can mean the understanding is obvious, or the understanding is there's no need to elaborate on it for our understanding or purification. So the acharyas didn't say anything. And maybe in those cases, it's not really necessary to go deeply into it, other than what may be like obvious to us, obvious conclusions we can make. Okay.
So can I say something? For me, is it so advanced that I even don't understand nothing, to be honest. I only can understand the words. They're here translated in English, like 3 sons or 45 descendants or gods or grandfathers or fire gods. But the conclusion of all this, or what is it about in this story? I don't get it. But
yeah,
it's
I have an answer for you. Because Prabhupada was asked.
Very interesting.
Prabhupada was asked this question. There's a lot of things we won't understand. And some of those things we don't understand now, we should understand. And some of those things it doesn't matter, and we may never understand, and it's not important. But in either case, Prabhupada said, just keep reading, because you're actually becoming purified by reading. So sometimes you don't understand intellectually, but by hearing it, you're being purified. By hearing the Sanskrit, you're being purified. And trying to understand, even if you can't, you're using your intelligence in service. Even if you don't understand, it's actual service to try to understand. And I also think that sometimes Srila Bhaktisiddhanta also spoke in elevated terms because it would force people to use their intelligence and try to understand. So that kind of engaged their intelligence. So, and there are some things that we are not capable of understanding unless we're more advanced. So, it's like if you're starting math and they throw out some algebra at you, you don't understand, but you're not supposed to, because you wouldn't understand it till you go through all the basics of math. So it's okay. And sometimes when we don't understand something, it's kind of inspiring to understand that there's so much that we don't understand, that someday we can understand. And it's also inspiring to understand that there's so much we don't understand in our philosophy, which means it's very vast and deep and profound. It's not so simple, that there's so much in the universe and so much in the spiritual world I don't understand. So you can kind of get inspired by not understanding. That's also possible.
Mm.
Well, that's good to know. No.
Yeah, I mean, like even in the world of science, you might study something, and some scientist is discovering something new, like when quantum mechanics was new. This was a whole different way of looking at the universe. And so maybe you study quantum mechanics and you're like, wow, something happening here is vibrating across the world somewhere else in the quantum field. And it's like, oh, I don't understand that. But it opens you up to like, oh, there's a different dimension I didn't, understand. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll understand it, maybe I won't. And just like we don't understand how the computer's working, but we can use it. So that's also there, Maybe I don't understand it, but it's just purifying to hear it. So all those things are there. And, you'll understand what you understand when you understand, and just try to understand. But with stuff like this, you don't have to bother your brain too much, because it's even older devotees don't understand everything, because it's like historical details, which are not elaborated here in the Bhagavatam. So how would we know unless we like read all the Puranas? And for us, we read the Puranas to evolve our bhakti, not just to gather information about demigods. So that's what I have to say about that. That's my excuse for not knowing this, but I think it's also a sign of chastity to Prabhupada to not know certain things, because it means we're not reading a million books that could explain things that aren't that important. Anyway, okay, it's time to go, right? People to see, places to go. Hare Krishna. And Chaitanya Dasi, consider possibility of doing starting class at noon, my time, which would be a half hour earlier from where we are now. That could also work for me, in a sense better, because like when I work on something in the morning, it's really hard for me to stop, because that's when my mind is the most clear. So I have to stop like at 9 to have breakfast and then work on it. And it would actually be better for me. I could accomplish more if I gave this class at noon. And I think the only people it would be bad for is people in Siberia, because then it would be midnight for them. But I think it's only Nadia, and I don't know if she comes anyway. Okay, so we'll talk about it.
I think your time change is coming soon.
And we're going forward or backward?
We stay the same here in Hawaii. And I think, let's see, fall back. So there'll be
My 12 o'clock is going to be
I'd have to
11
double
o'clock.
check.
Is that correct? Spring forward, fall back. So it means we set the clock back. Correct? So starting at noon would be too late for you, or money. We'd have to start at 11.
November 5th is so then yeah, what time is it there now?
It's 12:35.
So I think it would be 11:35.
Yeah, so we would start at 11. That also works. And do you have daylight savings in Europe?
Yes, we do, but we change it 1 week earlier than in the
So it's the
US.
same thing. So you'd be an hour earlier. So it would be like 5, 6 o'clock your time. We did it 12 o'clock my time. Anyway, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Check out all the times, and I will ask devotees.
I think it's later in Europe is probably better, but for Hawaii, it's a different thing. Maybe it's okay. You let me know. Okay.
Vanchapatrubyascha kripasindubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Jai
It's
Prabhupada.
Mahaprabhu ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhaktivinoda
Yeah.
ki jai.
Goodbye in Croatian, goodbye in English, goodbye in Spanish, goodbye in German, goodbye in Swedish, and goodbye in Hindi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
See you Friday, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare
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 Bol.
Krishna.